already been an arduous, surreal journey for Hawaiian female prisoners sent to do their time on the mainland when they found themselves in a small, utterly foreign southern town called Wright, Kentucky. Among those women was Sarah Amau, 43, one of the 62 Hawaiian female prisoners who first arrived in southern Texas in May 1997. From their island home, they had been transferred to the Crystal City Correctional Center, roughly 40 miles from the United States-Mexico border. According to prisoner and local news accounts, the facility was in dire shape, and the heat extremes were completely unfamiliar to the prisoners. The prisoners, including Amau, did what they could to fit in. Amau gained the trust of the guards and the facility officials and was even allowed outside facility walls on work detail. The acclimation was short-lived. In August 1998, all of the Hawaiian women were moved to the Central Oklahoma Correctional Facility, newly built by the Correctional Services Corporation in the town of McLeod. The prisoners sent word back to Hawaii that the living conditions there were acceptable, even if they had yet to receive a visit from a single family member because of the cost and distance of travel. But things went from tolerable to terrible in February 2003 when the Oklahoma Department of Corrections announced its intent to purchase the facility. By late summer of that year, the Hawaiian women reported back to the Hawaii Department of Public Safety that the overall operations and security of the prison were unbearable. According to reports received by Kat Brady, this woman who I mentioned earlier, the situation involved disgruntled unionized staff, lack of programs, sick leave abuse, and staff having sexual relationships with inmates. The Hawaii Department of Public Safety acted slowly, eventually deciding against bringing the women home. Instead, the prisoners were moved yet again to another state. This time, they were sent to the Brush Correctional Facility in Colorado, where the women found themselves with leaky rooftops, broken plumbing, a lack of drug treatment programs, and inadequate medical care. BCF prison employees were hired quickly and, as it turned out, without the requisite background checks. Allegations of sexual harassment and abuse were soon to follow. Initially dismissed by the GRW Corporation's internal investigations, many of the accusations turned out to be true. Not only had 5 convicted felons been hired as staff members, but 4 prison employees were soon charged with and convicted of criminal offenses ranging from running a cigarette smuggling ring to sexually abusing female prisoners. BCF's prison warden resigned and was later indicted as an accomplice in one of the sexual misconduct cases. It was clearly time to send the women somewhere else, that is, anywhere but back home, where Hawaii's sole female prison continued to pack 3 women into cells designed to accommodate 1 to 2 prisoners at most. The next stop for the Hawaiian women ended up at one of the most remote mainland locations imaginable. Located in the mountains of eastern Kentucky, Wright, population 1,048, was once a successful coal mining town with a national steel plant that employed 3,000 people. That all changed in 1970 when the plant shut down. The town quickly dwindled in both population and resident income. Building a prison in 1993 on the site of a former coal camp seemed to be a great solution to this town's intractable problem of unemployment. Indeed, when the Corrections Corporation of America, CCA, bought the facility in 1999, the corporation quickly became the town's biggest employer. Private prisons know the advantages of moving into economically devastated rural communities. Generous tax incentives, low construction costs, and a cheap labor market being key among them. Once the facilities are built, the private prison companies strive to keep them at maximum capacity. So I'm going to skip around here. Basically, they start having riots at this facility and many others. Each out-of-state inmate was costing, back in Hawaii, they were costing the state about an average of $108 a day. What CCA was offering, which is why this is so lucrative despite the ridiculous distance, $56 a day. So they're basically, we can have your cost. And one of the ways that they cut back, of course, is lack of proper food or of any drug treatment services. And again, mind you, most of these women are in on drug-related offenses. At the time that I wrote this piece, and as I understand it, it has not changed since, not a single one of these women has received a visit from a family member. They across the board, poor women, the cost to fly from Hawaii to the mainland, and then imagine to a place like this, in the hills somewhere, they weren't receiving any visits, and even then, in terms of the phone calls, they were limited oftentimes to getting about 1 call a month or being able to call and talk to their family. Those calls at that point were running, for a 15-minute call, running about $20. So, These days, Otter Creek houses over 120 Hawaiian women alongside Kentucky state prisoners. Half of the Hawaiian women are serving crystal methamphetamine, meth-related offenses, and most of them are incarcerated on nonviolent charges. 95% of these women are mothers. Not a single woman has gotten a visit from a child or other family member at the facility, and collect phone calls from the prison can run more than 60 cents per minute. Since arriving at Otter Creek, women at the facility have complained consistently about cold temperatures in cells, loss of property during their transfers, racial and sexual harassment, bizarre medical care, and commissary hours, which ran from 2 to 4 in the morning. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, they do.
Yep. They do?
Yeah.
And drinking water. Do you want to explain what an IMU is?
IMU stands for Intensive Management Unit. These are sensory deprivation control units. Most states have them. On any given day, around 6 or 7% of the U.S. prison population is housed in them.
Yeah. And control units, definitely a real trend in corrections. But yeah, IMU, they do 2 to 4, huh?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, this is standard, and this wasn't a control unit, so. The drinking water there has caused widespread diarrhea and vomiting. Among other scandals that have begun to emerge from that facility, Eldon Hackett, a 43-year-old guard at Otter Creek, is accused of providing food and candy to a female prisoner in exchange for oral sex. In addition, the Kentucky-based Floyd County Times reported that Otter Creek's drug counselor, Tanya Crum, 32, had been arrested for trafficking in methadone. Kat Brady, the aforementioned coordinator of the Hawaii-based Community Alliance for Prisoners, has been corresponding with both the inmates and their families. Brady was alarmed to find out that the prisoners are regularly threatened with administrative segregation if they complain about medical conditions. In one situation, a Hawaiian inmate who asked to remain nameless wrote to Brady that she's constantly coughing up blood and had repeatedly asked for medical assistance. When the medical unit at the prison finally saw her, she was given a nasal moisturizer and told that she simply had a sinus infection. The prisoner's condition worsened, and she was eventually rushed to the Hazard Regency Medical Center in lead shackles and at gunpoint. The inmate had to have emergency surgery. One lung had completely filled with blood. Prison officials then ignored a follow-up appointment scheduled by the surgeon until Brady intervened on the woman's behalf. Another female inmate, who also requested anonymity, told prison staff about severe arm and leg pain for several months, only to be told that she would be placed in ADSEC if she continued to complain. When she was eventually taken to the hospital in critical condition, triple bypass heart surgery had to be performed. It is possible that all of this would have escaped notice had it not been for Sarah Almau. Almau, serving a life sentence for second-degree murder, had been incarcerated since 1993. She had a shot at parole eligibility in August 2008, so that would have been this year. But in November 2005, Almau started experiencing severe gastrointestinal distress. Family members, fellow prisoners, and Brady's contact with the prison itself suggest that Almau's pleas for medical care were ridiculed, downplayed, and outright ignored by prison employees. As her stomach distended and other body parts began to swell visibly, prisoners say that Almau was fed castor oil and told to stop complaining unless she wanted to face disciplinary action. On New Year's Eve 2005, after 2 days in critical condition, her complaining stopped. Almau was dead of unexplained causes at the age of 43. So, this is not to say that private prisons are the only places where these kinds of things happen. I should make that very clear. But the lack of public oversight in general, which we should agree is a national phenomenon, is particularly true in these kinds of institutions. And this is part of the problem that we as media also have in accessing. They don't feel any amount of obligation to let us in. It's almost as if they're doing us a favor. And that's not to say it's easy to get into state facilities either, much less into federal prisons, where now what I'm hearing very commonly is that I've been denied on security grounds. And when I say, what security? I pass all my background checks and all of that. Well, it's security. It's as if this whole, the whole post 9/11, terrorism scares enough for them to just say security, you're out. So, with that, do we want to open it up to
Sure, absolutely.
Q&A?